Some stories stay with you longer than others, not because they're loud or fancy, but because they remind you of something true, something you maybe lived through yourself or watched someone you loved endure. This is a story about a young woman who lost everything except her dignity, and a man the whole county had already judged and sentenced without a trial. It takes place in 1884 in a small Arizona town called Copper Bluff, where dust got into everything and gossip traveled faster than the mail. I share it with you the way my grandmother used to share hers, sitting on the porch, speaking plain, trusting that you'll understand what matters without me spelling it all out. The auctioneer's voice cracked across the noon heat like a whip. Lot 14, Clara Ashford, 23 years, good teeth, educated, can cipher and keep books. They called it a contract auction, not legal. Exactly. But out here, the law was whatever people agreed to. Clara's father had signed the papers before he died, trading his daughter's hand for the debts he couldn't pay. She stood on the wooden platform, her mother's carpetbag clutched against her hip. 19 faces stared up. The woman before her, a seamstress named Dottie, had wept until 2 men helped her down. Clara's jaw ached from clenching. A fly landed on her wrist. She didn't move. Starting bid. $40. Who'll start? Silence. Then whispers. Then the crowd parted. A tall figure at the back, wide shoulders blocking the sun. People stepped aside like he carried plague. Caleb Stone, someone hissed. Lord have mercy. He walked forward. Dust rose around his boots. Clara's fingernails cut half moons into her palms. If this opening moved something in you, I'd be grateful to hear where you're reading from today. My grandmother always said good stories have a way of finding the folks who need them most. The wagon jolted over a rut, and Clara gripped the bench seat to keep from sliding. Caleb Stone didn't look at her. Hadn't looked at her since he paid the auctioneer and walked toward the horses. 2 hours now. The sun had shifted from overhead to pressing against her left shoulder, baking through the faded calico. Sweat gathered at her hairline. Her throat felt lined with sand. Caleb's hands rested easy on the reins. Big hands, calloused, with rope burns across the knuckles and an old scar running from thumb to wrist. He talked to the horses in a low murmur. She couldn't quite catch more words than he'd given her. He reached beneath the seat and pulled out a canteen, uncorked it, held it toward her without turning his head. Water. Clara's tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth. She shook her head. He didn't push, just set the canteen on the bench between them and faced forward again. Pride was all she had left. She wasn't about to drink his water like some grateful stray he'd picked up. The land stretched flat and brown in every direction, broken only by saguaros standing like sentinels and the occasional mesquite tree twisted by wind. Then the wagon crested a low rise, and Clara saw it. A whitewashed house, 2 stories, a wraparound porch with actual railings. Behind it, a red barn, and beyond that, cottonwood trees throwing long shadows in the late afternoon light. This wasn't the hovel she'd imagined. Caleb pulled the wagon up to the porch. A Mexican woman stood in the doorway, wiping her hands on an embroidered apron, middle-aged, solid. Her dark eyes moved over Clara without judgment. "Mija," she said, "you look like you ain't slept in days. Come." Caleb lifted Clara's carpetbag from the wagon bed. He didn't offer his hand to help her down, and she was grateful for that one less thing to refuse. Inside, the house smelled of cedar and coffee, clean floors, calico curtains. He walked ahead of her, pointing as he went. Stove, pump works, A pause at a closed door. "Your room?" He set the carpet bag inside, stepped back into the hallway. "Locks on the inside." Then he was gone. Boots already thudding down the stairs, Clara stood in the doorway. The room held a bed with a quilt, a washstand, a coal oil lamp, and a door with an iron lock. Why would a man who just bought her make sure she could lock him out? Roosters crowed before dawn. Clara lay still beneath the quilt, listening to the house settle around her. Footsteps on the stairs heavy, unhurried. The back door opened and closed. Then silence. She waited until full light crept through the calico curtains before rising. The carpet bag sat where she'd left it by the dresser. Clara unpacked slowly 2 dresses, a hairbrush with a cracked handle, her mother's Bible with the leather cover worn soft from years of holding. She arranged them in the dresser drawers, smoothing the fabric flat. These few things were all that remained of the life before. The hallway smelled of coffee, strong, bitter, the kind brewed hours ago and left to thicken on the stove. Clara followed the scent down the narrow stairs, her hand trailing along the wooden banister worn smooth by years of palms. The kitchen stood empty. A cast-iron stove dominated one wall, its warmer box still holding heat. Inside, a tin plate covered with a clean cloth. Clara lifted the edge. Biscuits, 2 strips of bacon, the grease already congealed white. A fork laid beside it. On the table, a scrap of paper. 2 words in blocky handwriting. Eat. See. She stared at the note. He rationed words like they cost him something. Clara ate standing up, chewing without tasting, her eyes moving across the kitchen. Clean counters, a pump handle over a tin sink. Jars of flour and sugar lined up like soldiers, everything in its place. But nothing personal. No embroidered towels, no photographs, no sign that anyone actually lived here, rather than just passed through. She washed her plate in the sink, pumping cold water that smelled faintly of iron. Through the window above the basin, she could see the barn, the corrals, and beyond them, 2 men on horseback moving cattle toward the north pasture. One of them, by taller than the other, Rosa appeared in the doorway. A basket of potatoes balanced on her hip. "You sleep?" Clara nodded. "Good." Rosa settled into a chair by the window and pulled out a paring knife. The blade flashed as she worked, brown peels curling into the basket at her feet. "Senor Caleb, he don't know what to do with nice things, just knows work. Been that way since his mama passed." She glanced up. "You want coffee? Still hot?" Clara poured herself a cup from the pot on the stove. The coffee was thick enough to chew. "How long have you worked here?" 15 years. Came when the old Senor Stone was still alive." Rosa's knife paused. "That one. He knew what to do with nice things. Break them." She resumed peeling. "Caleb ain't his father. You remember that?" Clara didn't ask what she meant. Some things you learned by watching, not asking. She spent the morning exploring. The parlor held a horsehair settee, a cold fireplace, and a shelf of books so dusty their titles had faded. The dining room table could seat 8, but looked like no one had eaten there in years. Upstairs, 3 bedrooms besides her own, all empty, all clean, all waiting for people who never came. The house felt like a shell, a body without a heartbeat. Midday heat pressed against the windows when the back door banged open. Clara turned from the parlor shelf to find Caleb standing in the kitchen doorway. Dust coated his shirt, his hat, the stubble along his jaw. He held a leather ledger in one hand. He didn't sit. I ain't good at the indoor part. His voice came out rough, like he hadn't used it all morning. Books, supplies, the house. He set the ledger on the table. You want the job? It's yours. Clara crossed to the table. The ledger was thick, its cover cracked, its marbled end papers peeling at the corners. She opened it. Chaos. Numbers crowded the margins without columns. Entries lacked dates. A payment marked received appeared twice on separate pages. Someone had tried to calculate totals and given up halfway through, leaving sums dangling like unanswered questions. This is 3 years of records. 4. He shifted his weight. His eyes stayed on the ledger, not on her. Maybe 5. Clara turned another page, found a note that said only owed Wilkins something about fence posts. No amount, no date, nothing. Why me? The question came out before she could stop it. At the auction. Why'd you bid? Caleb's jaw tightened. A full 10 seconds passed. The clock on the mantel ticked. You didn't cry. He said it low, almost to himself. The other one did. Figured. Another pause. His throat moved. Figured you could handle it. Clara looked at him, really looked. The dust in his hair, the rope burns on his hands. The way he stood with his shoulders braced like he expected a blow. Her father had taught her to cipher when she was 8 years old, sat her at the kitchen table every evening after supper, working through sums until the numbers came easy as breathing. He'd been a different man then before her mother died. Before the bottles, before the debts swallowed everything. She pulled out the chair, sat down, found the inkwell and steel nib pen tucked in a drawer beneath the table. The first entry read, January 1882. Supplies paid. No vendor. No amount. No record of what supplies. Clara dipped the pen. Drew a careful line through the entry. Wrote beside it, incomplete. Requires verification. She heard Caleb exhale, a long breath, like something in his shoulders had come unknotted. When she looked up, he nodded once more to himself, then to her, and walked out. His boots crossed the porch. The back door didn't slam. He'd closed it gently, like he was leaving a room where someone slept. Rosa appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked at Clara sitting at the table, pen in hand, ledger open before her. A small smile crossed her weathered face. Dinner's at 6. He eats with the hands, but you eat in here. I'll bring it. Why doesn't he eat in the house? Rosa paused. He says the house is for family. Hands eat in the bunkhouse. She turned to leave, then stopped. His mama. She used to sit right where you're sitting. Kept the books the same way. Died in that chair when Caleb was 19. Clara's hand stilled on the page. What did she die of? Rosa's eyes went distant, worn out. That's what the doctor said. But I was here. I saw. She shook her head slowly. The old Senor Stone. He took everything from her. Every bit of light she had. Caleb. He watched it happen. Couldn't stop it. Wasn't big enough yet. The afternoon light slanted through the window. Falling across the ledger's yellowed pages, Clara looked down at the chaotic entries, the abandoned calculations, the years of records kept by a man who could rope cattle but couldn't balance accounts, a man who gave her a room with a lock on the inside, a man who bid on her because she didn't cry. She turned to the next page, found another error, corrected it. That night, lying in the dark with the door unlocked for the first time since she'd arrived. Clara stared at the ceiling and thought about what Rosa had said. The old Senor Stone. He took everything from her. She thought about the empty house, the dusty books, the dining table for 8, and she wondered what had the old man taken from his son. 3 weeks had worn a groove into Clara's days. She woke before dawn, dressed in the half-light, and descended to the kitchen where Rosa already had coffee thickening on the stove. Breakfast in the warmer, always the same biscuits. Bacon. Sometimes eggs if the hens were laying well. Caleb ate with the hands in the bunkhouse. Clara ate alone at the kitchen table. The ledger open beside her plate. The books consumed her mornings. 4 years of chaos didn't untangle easily. She'd sent letters to 3 vendors in Tucson, requesting duplicate invoices. She'd created a new system of columns, dates, categories. The numbers were beginning to make sense, revealing a ranch that earned more than it spent when the spending was tracked at all. Afternoons. She helped Rosa with mending, with meal preparation, with the endless small tasks that kept a house breathing. They didn't talk much. Rosa hummed hymns in Spanish while she worked. Clara found the sound comforting in a way she couldn't name. Evenings. Caleb returned from the range, covered in dust and sweat. He washed at the pump behind the house, ate with his men, and disappeared into the bunkhouse until dark. Clara saw him through windows, across distances, but rarely up close. They exchanged words only when necessary questions about supplies, about accounts, about the price of feed in town. He was polite, distant, careful. She didn't know what to make of him. Tonight, sleep wouldn't come. The room held the day's heat even with the window cracked open. Clara lay on top of the quilt in her cotton nightgown, watching moonlight crawl across the ceiling. The clock downstairs chimed 11, then 12. A sound. Clara sat up, through the window. She saw the movement, a flicker of light bobbing across the yard, a kerosene lantern, its flame shielded by a hand. The figure carrying it walked toward the small cabin set apart from the bunkhouse. The one Rosa had said was for storing tack. The figure was tall, broad-shouldered. Caleb. Clara's feet found the floor before she decided to follow. She pulled her shawl around her shoulders, slipped out her door, down the stairs, through the kitchen. The back door creaked when she opened it. She froze, but nothing stirred. The yard lay silver under the moon. The small cabin's window glowed amber. Clara moved along the shadow of the barn, her bare feet silent on the hard, packed earth. The night air carried the smell of hay and horse and something else, something sharp, medicinal. Her heart beat high in her throat. She reached the cabin wall, pressed her back against the rough wood. The window's shutters hung slightly ajar, a gap between the slats wide enough to see through. She leaned in. Caleb knelt beside a narrow cot. A man lay upon it, Miguel. One of the ranch hands, his face sheened with sweat. His leg wrapped in bandages that showed dark stains seeping through. The small table beside the cot held a basin of water gone pink, a bottle of brown liquid, strips of clean linen. Caleb's sleeves were rolled to his elbows. His hands, those big, scarred hands, moved with a gentleness that stopped Clara's breath. He unwound the old bandages slowly, carefully, dropping them into a bucket by his knee. The wound beneath made Clara's stomach clench. Torn flesh, swollen and angry. The edges ragged where something had ripped through, a horse's hoof, maybe, or barbed wire. Easy now. Compadre. Caleb's voice came low, rough with exhaustion. I know it hurts. Just gotta clean it again. Miguel's jaw tightened. His fingers gripped the cot frame until his knuckles went white. Caleb poured liquid from the brown bottle onto a clean cloth. The sharp smell intensified carbolic acid. Clara recognized. Her father had used it on cuts when she was a girl. It burned like fire, but it kept wounds from going bad. Doc wouldn't ride out. Caleb pressed the cloth to the wound. Miguel hissed through his teeth. Said 6 miles was too far for... He stopped. His jaw worked. Don't matter what he said. We do it ourselves. Entiendes? Miguel nodded, his breath coming in short gasps. Caleb worked in silence after that. He cleaned the wound with methodical care, rinsed it with fresh water, applied more carbolic acid. Then he reached for a small jar on the table salve of some kind, pale and greasy, and spread it across the torn flesh with his fingertips. Ain't letting you lose this leg. The words came out quiet, almost private, like a promise made to himself as much as to the injured man. Your wife's expecting in 2 months. You're gonna be there when that baby comes. You hear me? Miguel's eyes glistened. He nodded again. Caleb wound fresh bandages around the leg, tight enough to hold, but not so tight as to cut off blood. He tucked the ends in, checked his work, then sat back on his heels with a long exhale. I'll bring broth in the morning. Rosa's making it now. You need to eat. Keep your strength up. He stood, his knees cracking. Try to sleep. I'll be back before dawn to check. He gathered the soiled bandages into the bucket, poured the bloody water out the back window, rinsed the basin, refilled it with clean water from a pitcher, set it within Miguel's reach. Clara pulled back from the window, her pulse loud in her ears. She moved away from the cabin on silent feet, keeping to the shadows, not breathing properly until she reached the kitchen door. Inside, the house held its usual nighttime quiet. The clock ticked. A mouse scratched somewhere in the walls. Clara climbed the stairs on legs that felt strange beneath her, locked her bedroom door, sat on the edge of the bed with her hands pressed between her knees. The town doctor wouldn't ride 6 miles. For a Mexican. He'd meant for a man who worked on Stone Ranch. And Caleb, the man everyone feared. The man whose name made people step aside like he carried disease. That man knelt in a cabin at midnight, cleaning a wound with his own hands, promising a worker he'd be there when his baby came. Sleep didn't find her until the sky began to gray. Morning came heavy-eyed and slow. Clara dressed, descended, found Rosa at the stove. But instead of preparing breakfast, Rosa stood at the counter with a basket of apples and a crank-handled peeler, her hands moving in practiced rhythm. Applesauce, Rosa said without turning. Good for a man who can't chew proper. Miguel. His jaws still swole up from the fever. Clara poured herself coffee. Her hands felt clumsy around the cup. The doctor wouldn't come. Rosa's peeler paused, then resumed, the blade flashing silver. Dr. Hendricks don't ride out for Mexicans, don't ride out for Stone Ranch neither, even if the patient's white. Says he ain't setting foot on cursed ground. She snorted. Cursed este, like ground can carry a grudge. Clara sat at the table. The ledger lay where she'd left it, columns and figures waiting. Senor Caleb, he tended his mama the same way. Rosa's voice softened. Last 3 months of her life, she couldn't leave the bed, couldn't feed herself near the end. Caleb did it all, washed her, fed her, read to her from the Bible. He was 19. The apple peels curled into the basket. Long unbroken spirals, buried her with his own hands too. Dug the grave himself because the preacher wouldn't send men to help. Clara stared at the ledger without seeing it. The hands that quit people say he drove them off. Rosa turned then, her dark eyes sharp. People say plenty, most of it's lies. She wiped her hands on her apron. Hands quit because their wives get trouble in town, because the mercantile won't serve them, because the farrier charges double for stone horses. Caleb don't drive nobody off. The town does. She returned to her apples, her back to Clara, her voice dropping to something barely above a murmur. 15 years I been here. Seen 3 good men come to work this ranch and leave because living got too hard. Not because of Caleb, because of what his father did, and the town that can't forgive the son for the sins of the dead. Clara opened the ledger, stared at the columns she'd built, the order she'd imposed on chaos, but her mind stayed in that cabin. Caleb's hands on bloody bandages, his voice low and sure. Ain't lettin' you lose this leg. The town feared him. The town was wrong, and Clara began to wonder what else they were wrong about and what it would cost her to find out. The wagon wheels raised dust that settled on Clara's skirt. Her sleeves, the brim of the bonnet Rosa had insisted she wear. The road to Copper Bluff stretched flat and pale under the morning sun, the same road she'd traveled 4 weeks ago in the opposite direction. That day, she'd been cargo. Today, she sat on the bench seat with a supply list in her pocket, and a husband who still hadn't looked at her since they left the ranch. Husband. The words sat strange in her mind. They shared a roof, a table, a ledger full of numbers, nothing else. Caleb held the reins loose in his hands, guiding the horses with small movements of his wrists. He wore his good shirt, or what passed for good, the one with fewer patches, and had scraped the stubble from his jaw. Clara wondered if that was for her benefit, or for the Tuns. Copper Bluff appeared on the horizon as a cluster of weathered buildings huddled against the desert. The church steeple caught the light. The general store's painted sign, Henley's Mercantile, swung in the breeze. Caleb pulled the wagon to the hitching post and set the brake. He didn't move to help Clara down. She was grateful. She climbed down herself, her boots hitting the packed dirt, and together they walked toward the store. The bell above the door jangled when they entered. Mr. Henley stood behind the counter, a man shaped like a barrel with a waxed mustache and small eyes that tracked every movement in his store. Those eyes landed on Clara, slid past Caleb like he wasn't there. "Mrs. Stone!" His voice came out too loud, too bright. "What can I help you with today?" Clara glanced at Caleb. His face showed nothing. "I have a list." She pulled the paper from her pocket. 20 pounds of flour, 10 pounds of sugar, coffee, 4 pounds, if you have it. Salt pork, a tin of baking powder. Mr. Henley wrote each item without looking up. "Anything else?" "Carbolic acid, 2 bottles." The pen paused. Mr. Henley's eyes flicked toward Caleb, then away. "For the ranch," Clara added. She didn't explain further. While Mr. Henley gathered supplies, Clara moved toward the fabric section at the back of the store. Bolts of calico and muslin lined the shelves. She didn't need fabric, but standing at the counter while Caleb stood, ignored, felt unbearable. 2 women clustered near the ribbons. Mrs. Doyle, the banker's sister, and another woman Clara didn't recognize, thin, pinch-faced, with a bonnet that had seen better days. Their voices carried. "That poor auction girl." Mrs. Doyle spoke without lowering her tone. "Married to Stone, of all people. She'll learn soon enough. I heard he drove off 3 hands last month alone. Wouldn't surprise me. Apple don't fall far, does it? His father was a snake, and snakes breed snakes." Clara's hands clenched at her sides. Her nails bit into her palms. She turned, walked back to the counter. Mr. Henley had assembled the supplies in a wooden crate, tallied the cost on a slip of paper. He handed it to Clara, not to Caleb. who stood close enough to reach. "That'll be $4.30. Mrs. Stone." Clara paid from the purse Rosa had given her that morning. Mr. Henley counted the coins, made change, and slid it across the counter. "You need help loading that? I'll manage." Caleb's voice came flat, expressionless. He lifted the crate and walked out without waiting for a response. Clara followed. The bell jangled behind her. She heard laughter, soft, mean, from inside the store. They loaded the supplies in silence. Clara climbed onto the bench. Caleb released the brake, clicked his tongue at the horses, and they rolled out of Copper Bluff the same way they'd rolled in without a word spoken between them. The road stretched ahead. The sun climbed higher. Then Caleb turned the wagon. Clara gripped the bench as the wheels left the main road, jolting over rougher ground. A narrow track wound between scrub brush and cactus, heading west toward a line of low hills. "Where are we going?" Caleb didn't answer. The track curved around a rocky outcrop, and a homestead appeared. Weathered gray boards, a soddy with a single glass window, a fence missing half its posts. In the yard, 3 chickens scratched at dirt that looked too hard to hold anything worth eating. A woman stood at the well, hauling up a bucket, thin arms, a dress that hung loose. 2 children played in the dirt nearby, a boy of maybe 8, a girl no older than 6. A third child, older, carried firewood toward the house. Caleb stopped the wagon 30 yards from the door. He reached behind the seat and pulled out a flour sack 50 pounds. Clara guessed, watching the way his arms strained with the weight. He'd loaded it this morning before she came down. He walked to the door, set the sack on the step, knocked once. Then he turned and walked back to the wagon without looking at the house. The door opened. The woman appeared, her face gaunt, her eyes red-rimmed. She saw the flour. Her hand went to her mouth. Caleb climbed onto the bench, took up the reins. "Wait." Clara's voice came out sharper than she intended. She don't want to see me." He flicked the reins. The horses moved. Clara twisted on the seat. Looking back, the woman had crouched beside the flour sack, her shoulders shaking. The little girl ran to the doorway and saw the wagon pulling away. She raised her hand and waved, her small arm pumping back and forth. Caleb raised one hand, barely, a small motion, almost invisible. The wagon rounded the hill. The homestead disappeared. Clara faced forward. Her throat felt tight. "Who is she?" The reins creaked in Caleb's grip. Margaret Wilkins, widow. Her husband died 3 years back. "How did he die?" A long pause. The wagon wheels crunched over gravel. "Broke. Lost everything he had. Then took sick. Couldn't afford a doctor. Couldn't afford medicine." Caleb's jaw worked. "My father sold him a parcel of land up on Miller's Ridge. Took his money. Then had a lawyer prove the deed was bad. Wilkins lost the land and the cash both." Clara's stomach turned. "Your father cheated him." "Cheated half the families in this county, one way or another." Caleb's voice stayed flat, but his knuckles had gone white on the reins. Land deals, cattle sales, loans that came due too fast. The old man had a gift for taking what wasn't his. The road straightened. The ranch appeared on the horizon, white walls bright against the brown hills. "I been painted back." Caleb spoke to the road, not to her. Quiet-like. "Started after I buried him. Figured if I could undo even some of what he did." "Does she know it's you?" "No." His voice hardened. "And she don't want to. The Stone name's poison in this valley. Folks would rather starve than take help from one of us." A pause. So I don't let 'em know. Clara watched his profile, the set of his jaw, the tension in his shoulders. How long have you been doing this? Since I was 22, and you're 31. He finally looked at her. His eyes held something she hadn't seen before, not anger, not distance, but a weariness that went down to the bone. Buried my father at 21. Been payin' ever since. The wagon rolled into the yard. Caleb set the brake. Rosa appeared on the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Clara didn't move to climb down. How many families? Caleb sat very still. 11. That I know of. He exhaled. Might be more. The old man didn't keep records of who he ruined. He climbed down from the wagon, lifted the supply crate, walked toward the house without looking back. Clara sat on the bench, her hands folded in her lap. The sun pressed down. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals. 11 families, 9 years of quiet restitution, and the town called him a snake. She climbed down from the wagon, her legs unsteady. Rosa held the door open, asking something about the supplies, but Clara barely heard. Her mind stayed on that moment Caleb's hand raised, just slightly, returning a little girl's wave. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in the dark and listened to the house settle around her. Thought about the flour sack on the widow's doorstep. Thought about Mr. Henley's eyes sliding past Caleb like he wasn't there. Thought about the women by the ribbons. She'll learn soon enough. They were right about one thing. She was learning. But what she was learning, that the man they feared spent his nights saving a worker's leg and his mornings leaving flour for widows who would never thank him, wasn't what they meant. And she wondered if the town ever learned the truth. Would it matter? Or had they hated the stone name so long that the truth couldn't reach them anymore? The dress had belonged to someone else once. Clara could tell by the way the seam sat let out twice. Taken in once, the stitches different each time. Rosa had worked on it for 3 evenings, adjusting the waist, hemming the sleeves, adding a strip of lace at the collar that almost hid where the fabric had faded. You look fine. Mija. Rosa stepped back, studying her work. Real fine. Clara turned before the small mirror in her room. The dress was blue, not bright blue, but a soft, dusty shade that reminded her of twilight. The nicest thing she'd worn since before her father died. She was going to the church social, alone. Caleb had refused. Not harshly, he never spoke harshly to her, but with a finality that left no room for argument. I show up. It ruins it for you worse. He'd said it that morning, standing in the kitchen doorway, hat already in his hands. You go. Try to make some connections, friends. Maybe, might be easier without me there. Clara hadn't argued. Part of her knew he was right. Rosa had arranged for one of the hands to drive her most of the way in the small cart. He left her at the crossroads a mile from town, promising to wait there until sundown. Clara walked the last stretch alone, her boots raising small puffs of dust with each step. The church appeared through the mesquite trees, its whitewashed walls bright against the afternoon sky. She could hear the social before she saw it, voices and laughter floating from behind the building. Tables had been set up in the yard, covered with pies and preserves and platters of fried chicken. Women in Sunday bonnets clustered in groups of 3 and 4. Men stood apart, talking cattle and weather. Children chased each other between the tables, shrieking. Clara smoothed her skirt, lifted her chin, walked through the gate, heads turned, conversations paused, then resumed, slightly lower, slightly faster. She moved toward the refreshment table. A glass pitcher of lemonade sweated in the heat, surrounded by tin cups. Clara poured herself a drink. The lemonade was warm and too sweet. "Mrs. Stone?" Clara turned. A woman she didn't recognize, middle-aged, plump, with kind eyes, stood beside her. "I'm Martha Greer. My husband runs the feed store." The woman's smile seemed genuine. "How are you settling in?" "Well, thank you." Clara's voice came out steadier than she felt. "The ranch keeps me busy." "I imagine it does." Mrs. Greer glanced around, then lowered her voice. "Don't let the others bother you. Small towns have long memories, but they warm up eventually." Before Clara could respond, another voice cut through. "Martha, dear, we need you for the pie judging." Mrs. Harlan, the banker's wife. Clara recognized her from descriptions Rosa had given: tall, thin, with a face that looked like it had been carved from soap and left to harden. She wore a dress of deep green silk, too fine for a church social, and her bonnet dripped with ribbons. Mrs. Greer's smile tightened. "Of course, Eleanor." She touched Clara's arm briefly, then moved away. Mrs. Harlan didn't follow. She stayed, her eyes moving over Clara with the slow assessment of someone pricing livestock. "The auction girl." She said it loud enough for nearby women to hear. Several turned. "I wondered if you'd come." Clara's grip tightened on her lemonade cup. "I don't believe we've met formally. I'm Clara Stone." "Yes." Mrs. Harlan's lips curved, but her eyes stayed flat. "Stone. Such an appropriate name. Hard and cold." She laughed, a thin sound like cracking ice. "Tell me, how do you find married life? Is it everything you imagined when you stood on that platform?" Heat climbed Clara's neck. "I find it suits me well enough." "Does it?" Mrs. Harlan turned to address the women who had gathered. Moths to her particular flame. I suppose some women adapt to anything. Survival instinct, like those little lizards that change color to match their surroundings. Titters from the group. Someone covered her mouth with a gloved hand. Clara set her lemonade down on the table. Carefully, deliberately, the glass clinked against the wood. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean, Mrs. Harlan." "Don't you?" The older woman's voice carried across the yard. Other conversations had stopped now. Clara felt eyes on her from every direction. "I only mean that some goods are second-hand for a reason. Marked down, final sale." Mrs. Harlan smiled, showing teeth. "No returns accepted." The laughter spread, soft, mean, knowing. Clara's face burned. Her hands trembled at her sides. She pressed them against her skirt to still them. "If you'll excuse me." She walked. Didn't run, wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Her boots struck the dirt. The gate swung open under her hand. The road stretched ahead, pale and empty. She made it past the church steps, past the hitching posts, past the first bend in the road, where the buildings disappeared behind a stand of mesquite. Then her eyes blurred. She walked faster. The tears came anyway, hot and angry. Streaming down her cheeks, she wiped them away with the back of her hand. But more followed. 6 weeks of swallowed pride, of careful silence, of pretending the whispers didn't reach her, all of it breaking loose at once. The crossroads came into view. The cart wasn't there. She was early, hours early, but something else waited in the shade of a cottonwood tree. Caleb's wagon, the horses drowsing in the heat. He sat on the bench, hat pulled low, watching the road. Clara stopped walking. stood in the middle of the road, tears still wet on her cheeks, chest heaving. He didn't ask what happened, didn't say a word, just climbed down, walked to the back of the wagon, and returned with his canteen. He held it out. This time, Clara took it. The water was cool, metal-tinged, and it washed the taste of too sweet lemonade from her mouth. She drank until her throat stopped aching. Caleb waited. She handed back the canteen, climbed onto the bench seat without his help, sat with her hands folded in her lap, staring at the road ahead. "How long have you been waiting here? Since you left?" His voice came quiet. Figured there might be trouble. Didn't want you walking back alone if there was." The wagon rolled forward. The wheels creaked. The horse's hooves struck a steady rhythm on the packed earth. A mile passed in silence. Then Clara spoke. "Your father." Her voice came out raw. "What was he like?" Caleb's hands tightened on the reins. The leather creaked. A minute passed. The wagon swayed. "Mean?" The word came out flat, hard. "Mean drunk. Mean sober. Mama used to say he was born with a grudge and died still holding it." Clara watched his profile. The muscle jumping in his jaw, the way his shoulders had gone rigid. "He hit her." Another long pause. "Yeah. And you?" Caleb didn't answer, but his eyes dropped to his left forearm, where his sleeve-covered skin Clara had never seen bare. She understood. The town blames you for what he did. The town remembers what he did. Caleb's voice stayed flat, but something underneath it strained. Every family he cheated, every man he ruined, every woman he stopped, swallowed. "They look at me and they see him. Can't blame him for that. You're not him. Don't matter." The words came quick, almost angry. "I got his name. I got his face. I got his let, his cattle, his house." His jaw worked. "I figured if I stayed, if I paid back what he took, helped the folks he hurt, maybe the name wouldn't taste so sour. Maybe someday." He didn't finish. Clara looked at him. Really looked. The dust in his hair, the lines around his eyes, too deep for a man of 31. The way he held himself like he expected a blow. "How long?" she asked. "How long until someday?" Caleb exhaled. A long, heavy breath. "Don't know." He stared at the road. "Maybe never. Maybe the name's too far gone." A pause. "Maybe I am too." The ranch appeared on the horizon. White walls, red barn, cottonwood shadows stretching long in the late afternoon light. Clara didn't look at the house. She looked at the man beside her, the man the whole county feared. The man who left flour for widows and sat up nights with injured workers and paid for sins he hadn't committed. She reached out. Her fingers touched his sleeve, just briefly, just enough to feel the muscle tense beneath the fabric. Caleb went still. "You're not too far gone." She said it quietly, simply, "And neither am I." He didn't respond, but his grip on the reins loosened, just slightly. And when the wagon rolled into the yard and Rosa appeared on the porch, Clara could have sworn she saw something shift in his face, something that hadn't been there before, that night. Lying in her room with the door unlocked, Clara stared at the ceiling and thought about Mrs. Harlan's words. Some goods are second-hand for a reason. She thought about Caleb, waiting in the shade for hours because he knew she might need him. He'd known without being told. She thought about the way his voice had cracked when he said, "Maybe I am too." And she thought we are both marked down. Both final sale. Both carrying prices set by other people's ledgers. But maybe Just maybe that made them even, outside her window. The moon rose over the barn. Clara closed her eyes, for the first time in 6 weeks. She didn't dream about the auction block. She dreamed about a cottonwood tree and a canteen of water, and a man who waited. The nausea came before dawn. Clara barely made it to the chamber pot in time. Her stomach clenched, heaved, emptied itself of nothing she hadn't eaten since yesterday's supper. She knelt on the cold floor in her nightgown, hands gripping the porcelain rim, and retched until her ribs ached. This was the 3rd morning. The door opened. Rosa appeared with a tin cup steaming between her hands. She didn't speak, just set the cup on the washstand and knelt beside Clara, gathering her hair back, holding it away from her face while another wave hit. When it passed, Clara sat back on her heels. Sweat beaded her forehead. Her mouth tasted of bile. Rosa handed her the cup. Ginger tea, sharp and hot. The smell alone settling something in Clara's stomach. Drink slow. Mija. Clara sipped. The warmth spread through her chest. Rosa watched her with dark, knowing eyes. The same eyes that had seen everything on this ranch for 15 years. She didn't ask questions, didn't offer platitudes, just waited. How long? Clara's voice came out raw. Since your last bleeding. Clara counted backward. The auction had been 8 weeks ago. Her cycle had come once since then, light. Brief. Almost nothing. She'd thought it was stress, the upheaval, the strangeness of her new life. But now, kneeling on the floor with ginger tea cooling in her hands, she did the math properly, 2 nights. She'd gone to Caleb's room twice, both times awkward, silent, over quickly. She'd told herself it was duty, what wives did, what the marriage required. Maybe it had been something else. 8 weeks, she whispered. Maybe more. Rosa nodded slowly. Her hand found Clara's shoulder, squeezed once. Your hips are good. You're strong. She said it simply, like stating the weather. This ain't your mama's story. Mija. Clara's cup trembled in her grip. Her mother had died in childbed. Clara was 14 when it happened, old enough to understand. Young enough that the memory still cut. The blood. The screaming that went on for hours. Then stopped. The silence afterward. Worse than the screaming. Her father had never been the same. Drank himself into debt. Then into the grave. And Clara had ended up on an auction platform. Sold to pay what he owed. Now she carried a child, a stone child. Rosa helped her stand, guided her to the rocking chair by the window. The morning light fell harsh across Clara's lap, illuminating hands that wouldn't stop shaking. I need air. She dressed clumsily, fingers fumbling with buttons. Rosa tried to help, but Clara pushed her hands away. She needed to move, needed to think, needed to be anywhere but inside this house that suddenly felt like a trap. The back door banged behind her. The yard stretched empty in the early morning. The hands were already out with the cattle. And Caleb had left before dawn. Clara walked past the barn, past the chicken coop, past the small cabin where Miguel had healed. She walked until the ranch buildings shrank behind her. The wash appeared suddenly, a dry creek bed that cut through the land, its banks steep and crumbling. Clara stopped at the edge, breathing hard, her mind churning. A child. She would have a child. In this place, with this man, carrying a name the whole county despised. She thought about her aunt in Kansas City, the one who had refused to take her when the debts came due. I can't afford another mouth. she'd written. "You'll have to manage." Clara had written to her once since arriving at the ranch, a brief letter announcing her marriage. No reply had come. No reply would come. That door was closed, and Clara knew now she didn't want it open. Whatever waited for her. It wasn't in Kansas City. Her foot slipped. The bank gave way beneath her. Dry earth crumbling like sugar, Clara grabbed for something, anything, and found only air. She tumbled down the slope, her dress catching on rocks, her hands scraping against dirt and gravel. The bottom of the wash rushed up to meet her. She landed hard, face first, in mud. The wash wasn't dry here. A seep had formed a pocket of water oozing from the earth, turning the creek bed to black muck. Clara's palms sank into it, her knees, her face pressed against the wet earth. Cold and foul-smelling, the taste of it in her mouth. She pushed herself up. Mud clung to her dress, her hair, her cheeks. She could feel it dripping from her chin, sliding down her neck, soaking through her bodice, and something inside her broke. She knelt in the muck and sobbed. Great, heaving sobs that shook her whole body. 8 weeks of careful composure, of holding herself together, of refusing to let anyone see her crack all of it pouring out into the empty wash where no one could hear. She was nothing, less than nothing. A woman bought at auction, carrying a child she hadn't planned. Covered in mud at the bottom of a ditch, her mother was dead. Her father was dead. Her aunt didn't want her. The town saw her as damaged goods, and now she would bring a child into this, a child who would bear the stone name, a child who would inherit all of Caleb's guilt and none of his quiet kindness. What had she done? Clara didn't know how long she knelt there, long enough for the sun to climb higher, long enough for the mud to dry and crack on her skin, long enough for the soaps to fade to silence. She climbed out of the wash on hands and knees. Her dress was ruined. Her hair hung in filthy clumps. She walked back to the ranch like something dragged from a grave. Rosa met her at the door. Her eyes widened, but she said nothing. Just drew a bath, heated water on the stove, helped Clara peel off the destroyed dress and sink into the tin tub. The water turned gray, then brown. "Tonight," Rosa said quietly. "You tell him tonight." Clara closed her eyes. Supper sat untouched on her plate. The kitchen lamp cast long shadows across the table. Outside, the sky had gone purple, then black. Caleb sat across from her. His coffee cup, the one with the chipped rim, rested between his hands. He'd washed at the pump and changed his shirt, but dust still clung to his hair. He knew something was wrong. Clara could see it in the way he held himself, watchful, tense, waiting. "I'm carrying," she said it flat. No preamble, no softening. 8 weeks, maybe more. Caleb's cup hit the saucer too hard. Coffee sloshed over the rim. He stared at her, his mouth opened. Closed, opened again. "Are you?" His voice cracked. He swallowed, tried again. "You gonna be all right?" Clara's hands twisted in her lap. "My mother died in childbed." Something moved across Caleb's face. His hands, those big, capable hands that roped cattle and changed bandages, began to tremble. "You need a city doctor. I'll get one. I'll sell the north pasture. Sell the whole place if I have to." The words came fast, tumbling over each other. "Whatever you need, whatever it takes." Clara watched him, watched his hands shake, watched his jaw work. "You're not asking about the baby. I'm asking about you." He said it fierce, almost angry. The baby's part of you. If you're not all right, nothing else matters." Clara's throat tightened. "Most men would want to know if it's theirs." Caleb flinched like she'd struck him. Is that—" He stopped, drew a ragged breath. "Is that what you think of me? I don't know what to think." Clara heard her own voice break. "I've been here 8 weeks. I barely know you. And now there's a child. And don't go." The words came out raw, desperate. "Please." Caleb's voice cracked again. His eyes glistened in the lamplight. "Please don't go. I know I ain't. I know this ain't what you wanted. I know I'm not what anyone would choose. But don't—" He stopped. His throat worked. Clara stared at him. This man the whole county feared. This man who moved through the world like he expected to be hated. He wasn't afraid of the child. He was afraid of losing her. "Why?" she whispered. "Why does it matter if I stay?" Caleb looked at her. Something naked in his face. Something he'd kept locked away behind all that sin. "Because you're the first one who did." The week after her confession, something between them had loosened. Not resolved, just lighter. Caleb still ate with the hands, still disappeared before dawn and returned after dark. But now he paused at the kitchen door each evening, asking if she needed anything. Now he left wildflowers on the porch rail, desert marigolds, brittlebush, whatever grew along the fence line. He never said they were from him. He didn't have to. Clara's mornings still started with nausea, but Rosa's ginger tea helped. The sickness usually passed by midday, leaving her tired but functional. She continued her work on the ledgers, continued her slow exploration of the house that was becoming, despite everything, home. The attic stairs creaked under her weight. She'd found them behind a door she'd assumed was a closet, narrow wooden steps rising into darkness. Rosa had gone to town for supplies. Caleb was out with the cattle. The house sat empty, and Clara's restlessness had driven her to explore corners she'd left untouched. The attic smelled of cedar and dust. Morning light filtered through a small window, illuminating a space crowded with the bones of another life. A dressmaker's form stood in one corner, its fabric faded to gray. Wooden crates lined the walls, a rocking horse with a cracked runner listed to one side, its painted eyes staring at nothing. Clara moved through the stalls carefully, her hand trailing over surfaces. Her other hand rested on her belly, a habit she'd developed without noticing. A trunk sat beneath the window, cedar, with brass fittings gone green with age. Clara knelt before it, lifted the lid. The smell of lavender rose up. Sachets. She realized small cloth bags tucked among folded fabric. A dress lay on top, blue calico with white buttons, carefully pressed and preserved. A woman's Sunday dress. Below it, a pair of gloves, a ribbon, a tortoise-shell comb with 3 teeth missing, and at the bottom, a ledger. Not like the ranch accounts, this one was smaller, bound in brown leather, worn soft with handling. Clara lifted it carefully. The pages crackled when she opened them. Handwriting filled the margins, small, careful letters, as if the writer had been saving ink. March 14th, 1862. Caleb took his first steps today. He walked straight to me, not to his father. I don't know why that mattered so much, but it did. Clara turned the page. June 3rd, 1865. Samuel came home drunk again. Broke the dishes I got from my mother. Caleb tried to pick up the pieces. Cut his hand. I bandaged it while Samuel slept in the barn. My boy didn't cry. He's 3 years old, and he didn't cry. The entries continued, years of them. Clara read with growing dread. September 1871. Samuel hit me in front of Caleb. First time he's done it where the boy could see. Caleb stepped between us. He's 11 years old. Samuel knocked him down, but didn't hit him again. Something in my boy's eyes stopped him. I don't know if that makes me proud or terrified. Clara's hands trembled on the pages. December 1873. Caleb is 13 now, taller than me. He follows his father everywhere, not from love, I think, but from vigilance. He watches Samuel the way a man watches a rattlesnake. Ready to move, ready to protect. My boy has a tender heart wrapped in iron. I pray someone sees past the iron someday. The last entry was dated 1875. I am tired, so tired. Samuel has taken everything from me, my youth, my joy, my hope, but he hasn't taken Caleb. My boy sits with me every night now, reads to me from the Bible. His hands are gentle when he helps me eat. He thinks I don't know about the bruises on his arms, the ones Samuel gives him when I'm not watching. But I know, I see, and I pray, every night, that when I'm gone, someone will see my boy for what he truly is, not his father's son, mine. Clara closed the ledger. Her throat ached. She sat in the dusty attic, surrounded by the remnants of a dead woman's life, and understood. The sky had turned brown by the time she came down. Rosa arrived back just as the first gusts hit wind that carried sand and grit. Scouring everything in its path, she rushed through the door with her basket, face covered with a bandana. "Dust storm," she said, as if Clara couldn't see the world disappearing outside the windows. "Bad one. Could last 2 days." They sealed the house, wet cloths pressed against window frames, doors bolted. The animals were already sheltered. Caleb and the hands had moved them to the barn at the first sign of the brown sky. Caleb came in last, his hat pulled low, bandana over his nose and mouth. Sand covered him from head to boots. He shook himself like a dog, but the grit clung. "Gonna be a while," he said, trapped. Clara, Caleb, and Rosa, sealed inside while the world outside vanished into brown wind. Rosa made cornbread and beans. They ate in the kitchen by lamplight, the windows rattling, the wind screaming like something alive. Clara couldn't taste the food. She kept thinking about the ledger, about an 11-year-old boy stepping between his father's fist and his mother's face. After supper, Rosa retreated to her room off the kitchen. The storm made sleep impossible, but she claimed her old bones needed rest whether sleep came or not. Clara and Caleb sat in the parlor. The kerosene lamp flickered. They were rationing fuel, not knowing how long the storm would last. The wind found gaps in the walls, sending fine dust drifting across the furniture. Caleb pulled a deck of cards from his pocket, dog-eared, soft with use. "You play?" Clara nodded. They played poker with dried beans for chips. The cards slapped against the table, the lamp hot, jumping shadows on the walls. Outside, the storm raged. Clara won the first 3 hands. "You hustle," Caleb said. Something moved at the corner of his mouth, almost a smile. "My father taught me." "The one who left you on the auction block." The words should have stung. They didn't. Clara dealt another hand. "He wasn't always like that. Before my mother died, he was different." She sorted her cards. "After, he just disappeared. Into bottles, into debt, into anything that wasn't the life he had left." Caleb studied his cards. "My father was born mean. No excuse for it, just was." Clara laid down 3 queens. Caleb folded. "I found your mother's diary." His hands stilled on the cards. "In the attic. I wasn't looking for it. I was just—" Clara stopped, Started again. I read it. All of it. Caleb didn't move. The lamp flickered. The wind howled. She wrote about you stepping between them. When you were 11, I remember. She wrote that you had a tender heart. Caleb's jaw tightened. He gathered the cards, shuffled them. His hands moved automatically, but his eyes were somewhere else. She was wrong about a lot of things. I don't think she was wrong about that. The cards slapped the table. Clara picked up her hand. 3 2s and nothing else. You expected me to run. She said it quietly. After the church social, you expected Mrs. Harlan to finish what the auction started. Caleb dealt himself cards without looking up. Wouldn't have blamed you. I don't run. Clara laid down her hand, a losing hand, but she didn't care. Ask anyone who tried to make me cry on that platform. Caleb went still. I saw that. His voice dropped low. Why I bid? The lamp guttered. Clara reached for the wick, adjusted it. The flame steadied. Tell me about the night he died. The wind filled the silence between them. Clara waited. Caleb set down his cards, stared at his hands, big hands, scarred hands. Hands that had done nothing but work and heal and pay for sins they hadn't committed. He'd been drinking, came home mean, meaner than usual, couldn't find something to hit. So he went looking for me. A pause. I was 21, bigger than him by then, stronger. But he had the belt. Clara didn't speak. He swung, caught me across the arm here. Caleb touched his left forearm, where the sleeve-covered skin Clara had never seen bare. I grabbed the buckle, held on. He tried to pull it back, and then... His throat worked. His face went red, then white, then he was falling, and I caught him. The lamp flickered. Heart gave out. Doc said later it was coming for years. All that drinking, all that rage, it used him up. Caleb's voice flattened. He died in my arms, belt still in his hand. Clara reached across the table. Her fingers touched his wrist. He flinched but didn't pull away. I buried him decent. The words came hoarse. Don't know why. Reckon I was hoping if I did right by him, if I paid back what he stole, helped the folks he hurt, maybe the hate would stop. He looked up. His eyes glistened in the lamplight. It ain't. 9 years and it ain't stopped. Clara's hand tightened on his wrist. Then you came. His voice cracked. And you didn't cry on that platform. And you didn't run when Mrs. Harlan... He stopped, drew a ragged breath. Ain't nobody ever stayed before. The hands quit. The neighbors won't speak. The whole county crosses the street when they see me coming. His jaw worked. But you stayed. The storm howled. The lamp burned low. I found your mother's last prayer, Clara said quietly. She asked that someone would see you for what you truly are. Caleb's hand turned under hers. His fingers curled around her wrist, not gripping, just holding, like she might disappear if he let go. What do you see? Clara looked at him. The dust in his hair, the lines around his eyes, the tremor in his hand. A man who buried his father decent, even though he didn't deserve it. She held his gaze. That's not his father's son. That's his mother's. Something broke in Caleb's face. Something that had been locked away for years. He didn't cry, but his grip on her wrist tightened, and when the lamp finally guttered out, leaving them in darkness, neither of them moved. The storm lasted through the night. They sat in the dark parlor, hands clasped across the table, and listened to the wind tear at the world outside. When dawn came, gray and still, the air thick with settling dust, Clara woke in the horsehair settee, with the blanket tucked around her shoulders. She didn't remember falling asleep. Caleb stood at the window, watching the sky clear. "Clara!" She sat up. His voice sounded strange. "Rider coming?" He turned. His face had gone pale. "From town, moving fast." Clara crossed to the window, a figure on horseback, pushing hard through the dust-hazed morning, coming straight for the ranch. Fast riders from town never brought good news. The rider was Miguel. Clara recognized him as he pulled up to the porch, the same man she'd watched through the cabin shutters. Leg wrapped in bloody bandages, Caleb kneeling beside him in the lamplight. He sat his horse carefully, favoring his left leg slightly, but strong enough to ride. 8 weeks of healing had done their work. He swung down and pulled something from his saddlebag, an envelope, slightly crumpled. "Senor Stone." Miguel held it out. "This came to the mercantile 3 days ago. Mr. Henley. He wasn't gonna bring it out. So I did." He paused, a smile breaking across his weathered face. "Figured you'd want to see it quick. Good news don't come often enough to this place." Caleb took the envelope, turned it over. His name was written in pencil, the letters shaky and uneven. "Who's it from ye? The widow Wilkins." Miguel's eyes moved to Clara, then back to Caleb. "She asked me to wait, said you might want to write back." Caleb stared at the envelope. His thumb traced the edge of the paper. Clara watched his face, watched the confusion there, the wariness. 9 years of leaving flour on doorsteps, and he'd never received a word in return. "I'll make coffee," she said quietly. "Miguel, you look like you could use some." She left them on the porch and went inside. Rosa was already at the stove, heating water. She said nothing, just handed Clara the coffee pot. Through the kitchen window, Clara could see Caleb still standing with the envelope in his hands. He hadn't opened it. Miguel spoke. Clara couldn't hear the words, but she saw Caleb's shoulders stiffen. Then slowly, carefully, he tore open the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He read it twice, 3 times. His hand dropped to his side, the letter dangling from his fingers. Clara carried the coffee out. "What does it say?" Caleb handed her the paper without speaking. The handwriting was the same shaky pencil. Clara read aloud, "Mr. Stone, I know it was you all along. The flour, the salt pork last winter, the money someone left in the water trough when my boy needed medicine. I told myself I didn't know, but I did. Your father took everything from my husband, but you have been giving it back, piece by piece, for years. I was too proud to say a thank you. I am saying it now. Your mama would be proud of the man you turned out to be, Margaret Wilkins." Clara lowered the letter. Caleb stood motionless. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. Miguel shifted his weight. "She ain't the only one. Senor, when I was in town yesterday, getting the supplies for my wife," he paused, "the farrier, he asked why I still work for you after what happened with my leg. What did you tell him?" "Told him the truth." Miguel's voice was steady. "That you sat with me 3 nights straight when the fever hit. That you cleaned my wound and changed my bandages when the town doctor wouldn't ride out. That my wife's gonna have our baby in 6 weeks, and I'll be there to see it because of you." The morning sun broke through the haze, casting long shadows across the porch. "What did he say about nothing?" Miguel almost smiled. But he listened. First time anyone in that town listened when I talked about Stone Ranch. Caleb didn't respond. His eyes had gone distant. staring at something Clara couldn't see. Miguel drank his coffee, refused a second cup, and rode back toward the bunkhouse where his wife waited. Clara and Caleb stood on the porch, watching him go. The letter lay on the railing between them. She knew, Clara said quietly, all this time. Caleb picked up the letter, folded it carefully, tucked it into his shirt pocket, over his heart. Don't change nothing. It changes everything. He turned to look at her. The morning light caught the lines around his eyes, the dust still clinging to his hair from the storm. Town still hates the stone name. One letter don't fix 9 years of, I'm not going anywhere. The words stopped him. Clara heard them hang in the air between them, solid as the wooden porch beneath her feet. I didn't choose that platform. She spoke slowly, clearly, holding his gaze. I didn't choose to stand up there while men bid on me like cattle. I didn't choose to come here, to this ranch, to this house. Caleb's throat worked. But I'm choosing now. Clara stepped closer. I choose this ranch. I choose this kitchen. I choose those ledgers that took me weeks to sort out. She reached for his hand, the scarred hand, the gentle hand. I choose you. Caleb Stone. You hear me? His fingers closed around hers, tight, almost painful. He tried to speak, couldn't. His jaw worked, his throat moved, but nothing came out. He just nodded, kept nodding. Clara held his hand and let him nod. The weeks that followed carried a different weight. Clara still woke before dawn, still descended to the kitchen, where Rosa had coffee thickening on the stove. But now Caleb joined them for breakfast. He sat at the table, the same table where his mother had kept the books, where she had died and ate biscuits and bacon while Clara worked on the ledgers beside him. He didn't talk much, neither did she. But the silence had changed. It wasn't distance anymore. It was something else. Rosa noticed. Clara caught the older woman watching them, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She said nothing about it. Rosa wasn't one for unnecessary words, but one morning Clara found a quilt, folded at the foot of her bed, yellow and white, tiny stitches, soft cotton batting, a baby's quilt. How long have you been working on this? Clara found Rosa in the kitchen, hands deep in bread dough. Since you came. Rosa didn't look up. Figured you'd need it eventually. Clara ran her fingers over the stitches, each one placed with care, with patience, with the certainty that something was coming that would need to be wrapped in softness. Thank you. Rosa nodded, kept kneading. 10 weeks after the storm, Caleb came home with a rocking chair in the back of the wagon. Not new, the wood was weathered, the joints worn smooth with use, but someone had refinished it recently. The arms gleamed with fresh oil. Clara remembered seeing old furniture in the storage barn when she'd explored the property chairs. Tables, things nobody had touched in years. He carried it onto the porch and set it beside the one that was already there. 2 rocking chairs, now, side by side. Facing west. Where did you find it? On storage barn. Caleb wiped his hands on his trousers. Was my mother's. Figured it needed to be out here, in the light. Clara lowered herself into the chair. The wood creaked beneath her, then settled. The seat curved perfectly to her body, as if it had been waiting. Caleb sat in the other chair. His boots scraped the porch boards. They watched the sun descend toward the horizon. Gold light spilled across the yard, the barn, the cottonwood trees throwing their long shadows. Clara's hand found his on the armrest between them. He didn't pull away. The baby moved. Clara gasped, Her free hand flew to her belly, 18 weeks now, the swell visible beneath her dress. The flutter came again, faint as butterfly wings, deep in her center. What? Caleb turned. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Clara's voice shook. Give me your hand. She guided his palm to her belly, pressed it flat against the cotton of her dress. They waited. The sun sank lower, the shadows stretched. The flutter came again, stronger this time. A tiny movement, barely perceptible, but real. Caleb went still, his breath caught. That's... yes. He didn't move, didn't speak. His hand stayed pressed against her belly, feeling the small life that stirred beneath. The sun touched the horizon. Light blazed across the desert, turning the saguaros to gold. Clara looked at the man beside her, the man who had bid on her because she didn't cry, the man who left flour for widows and sat up nights with injured workers, the man who had buried his father decent even though he didn't deserve it, and spent 9 years paying for sins he hadn't committed. His eyes shone in the fading light. He didn't look away from her belly. I wanted to be seen, Clara said quietly. That's all I ever wanted. To be more than auction goods, more than damaged merchandise. Caleb raised his head. His eyes met hers. You wanted the same thing. She held his gaze. To be seen for who you are, not whose name you carry. The flutter came again. Caleb's hand pressed closer. Maybe that's enough to start. Clara said, 2 people who see each other, 2 people who choose to stay. The sun slipped below the horizon. The sky blazed orange, then pink, then purple, then stars pricked it through the darkness one by one. They sat on the porch, side by side, watching the night come. Caleb's hand stayed on her belly. Clara's fingers stayed laced through his, somewhere in the bunkhouse. One of the hands played harmonica, a slow, sweet melody that drifted across the yard like smoke. Rosa appeared in the doorway with a lamp. She looked at them, nodded once, and went back inside. Clara closed her eyes. The rocker creaked beneath her. Caleb's warmth pressed against her side. Behind them lay the auction block, the whispers, the scorn of a town that couldn't forgive. Ahead lay a child, a name, a future still unwritten. But here, now, on this porch, with this man, Clara felt something she hadn't felt since before her mother died. Home. There's a quiet that comes after a story like this one. Not empty, just still. The kind of stillness that settles in when something familiar has been touched. Many of us have stood in places where we felt unseen. Some of us have carried names that weren't ours to carry, or loved people who didn't know how to show it back. Perhaps you've waited for someone to look past the surface, past the whispers, past the judgments, and simply see you. That waiting is heavy, and it doesn't always end the way we hope, but it's all right to sit with that. A story doesn't need to resolve everything to matter. Some things stay tender. Some things stay open, and that's allowed. Clara and Caleb found their way to something real, not because the world changed around them, but because they chose each other anyway. That's not a lesson. It's just what happened, and you stayed through all of it. Thank you for being here, for listening, for letting this story rest beside whatever you carry in your own heart. That means more than you know.